Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for October 27, 2024. To discuss the developments in Armenia in the past week, we're talking with Anna Karapetyan, who is Director of the Insight Analytical Center for Applied Policy and Research.
But before we start, just a couple of announcements. We're recording this episode on October 29, 2024, and it has been more than 405 days since the military political leadership of Artsakh has been taken hostage by the regime in Azerbaijan. Bako Sahakyan, Arkadi Hukasyan, Ruben Vartanyan, Arshavi Gharamanyan, David Ishkhanyan, and others need you to keep them in your memories and fight for their freedom every day. Unfortunately, their torment and the torment of other Armenian POWs and hostages continues to be met with widespread indifference by global governments, including, unfortunately, the regime in Yerevan as well.
So our usual thanks go to you, our listeners, for all your thoughtful comments on our YouTube videos. We read them all and appreciate your participation. We also take your thoughts and recommendations into consideration for future shows.
We have one extra special request for you today. If you listen to our show on Apple Podcasts, for example, on your iPhone, iPad, or your Mac computers, please consider rating our show and leaving a brief review. We have been stuck at 18 reviews for months, and we'd love to get the needle moving on that, folks. So this helps us immensely in reaching a wider audience. So please consider pausing this episode and going and giving us a rating before you continue. And make sure you're also following us on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Okay, on with the show then.
Welcome back, Anna. We're glad to have you back.
Welcome back.
I'm happy. Thank you.
So let's begin with the major development last week, which was the BRICS Summit. During the summit, which was held in Kazan, Russia, Armenia participated as an observer. While Pashinyan acknowledged the group's agenda positively, the Armenian Foreign Ministry later emphasized that Armenia has no plans to become a BRICS member. Another notable outcome from that meeting and from Armenia's participation was that Pashinyan had a meeting with Ilham Aliyev. In a short statement released afterwards, they instructed their foreign ministers to continue the peace deal negotiations, and I mean peace in quotes. And they said, to quote, in order to finalize and sign it as soon as possible. Pashinyan at the summit repeated that at least 80 to 90% of the content of the so-called peace deal is finalized and expressed his readiness to sign an interim document with only the content that so far has been agreed upon. But in the past, we know that Azerbaijan has repeatedly stood its ground, demanding that a complete agreement is reached on all points before it is signed. So let's begin with the BRICS organization. What is the benefit to Armenia for joining BRICS, and why won't Armenia consider joining it?
The main issue is Armenia waited to join the BRICS, or is Armenia invited to join BRICS? And then will come the issue about why Armenia will want or why Armenia doesn't want to join BRICS. The policy of government of Armenia now is to be as far from Russia as possible. And now BRICS is considered to be a new big and important project for Russia to show to the world that it is not isolated and that policy of West is not effective. And the main message of the BRICS Summit in Kazan was to show that the biggest countries are going to Russia and discussing some important issues with the leadership of Russia. And that's why now this project is very important for the Russian side, and that means that the government of Armenia will not want to be actively engaged in these processes. But at the same time, the Russian government made it very difficult for Pashinyan not to go to the BRICS Summit, because it was announced like it is important for Russia, and Russia hopes that Pashinyan will come, etc., etc. And the situation in the region told that he had to go. But it's important that even during this summit, in his statement, Pashinyan again made some statements that were showing that he's not changing his anti-Russian policy and that he's not going to deal with Russia in this context, because the first thing was that even speaking with Aliyev, he was speaking on the ground of the summit, but without mediation of Russia. They were speaking without any mediators. And Russian side welcomed any dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and they repeated they are ready to help this process, showing that they are ready to be mediator and they don't like some negotiations on their platform without them. And the second thing in the statement of Pashinyan was repeating his idea that in the statement of the 9th of November 2020, there is no point saying that Russia must have control over the road that is connecting Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan. Even if when we read the text of the statement, there is written with black letters on white paper that Russia's border guards must control the communication on these roads. So Pashinyan went to Kazan, but he showed that he is not going to have negotiations with Azerbaijan with mediation of Russia, and he is not going to open communications in the region with any involvement of Russian side.
Anna, I admit this is a tangent, but I think it's an important one to take. Some researchers we've spoken to on our podcast say that Russia's strategic intention is not to actually take over the corridor in and of itself. Instead, they argue that Russia wants to prevent other entities, especially Western entities, from taking over such a corridor. And if the status quo would be maintained, then Russia would be okay with that scenario as well. And I think there's no translation of the November 9-10 document in such a way where the word control, written in black on white, as you say, could take any other meaning. So I have to admit that Pashinyan seems to be twisting facts here about a document bearing his own signature. But Pashinyan's defenders say, why are you upset? Pashinyan is fighting for Armenia's sovereignty, despite apparently signing away that sovereignty on November 9-10. Meanwhile, Pashinyan is talking about bringing in some Western private company to help manage the corridor. He says that this option does not end up ceding sovereignty, despite the potential that any such agreement, in my opinion, would also involve Azerbaijan as a third party, an inimical third party to say the least, known to come up with false pretenses in order to tear up written documents and revert to military action. So I wanted to know, how important is it for Russia to control that corridor, and why is Pashinyan backing away from his own signature? Is it merely for Armenian sovereignty, as he says, or something else?
The issue is that it's important for Russia to have some special role in the region. In this case, it's the corridor, it may be something other, like it were the peacekeepers in the Artsakh, etc. So the corridor is a thing that was agreed. And as you mentioned, there is a translation of the document on the website of Prime Minister. And there is written, like I will read, control over transport communication shall be exercised by the border guard service bodies of the FSSS of Russia. And after this statement, Russia was actively involved in two main processes. They opened two tracks of negotiations that were the negotiations over unlocking of communications, and the second one was about delimitation and demarcation of the borders. And they were the first agreements about the establishment of the committees that will negotiate on these issues were agreed by mediation of Russia. And the idea was that Russia will have a special role in these negotiations and later in the implementation of the results of these negotiations. You will remember that Russia then was speaking about being having a special role in delimitation and demarcation of the borders, because only Russia has these maps that will help to have this process. So now this so-called corridor is important for Russia not to lose the last points of its legal involvement in the processes, because there is the statement of November 9, and there was the process later on that was based on this statement. And that's why Russia now sees this process as a possible place that it can be involved and it can have a special role. And that's why Armenian government there later started to speak about another project like the Crossroads of Peace, about the blocking of the communication, not to start the process from the point where Russia must have some involvement, like to say we are unblocking communications, but it's not based on the statement of November 9. It is another project. It's the project of Crossroads of Peace.
Now, coming back to the BRICS Summit, Pashinyan and Aliyev were seen to be very chummy and sitting next to each other and chatting like old friends, but maybe that's my subjective opinion. They also had a meeting, but as we said, the announcement didn't mention too many details. Are you aware of what was discussed during the Aliyev and Pashinyan meetings?
I'm aware as much as it's stated in the press, in the media. So there wasn't any information about the negotiations, but about the content of the negotiations. But it's clear that they are trying to agree on the points that are not agreed yet, and that Pashinyan speaks a lot about, saying that we have agreed 80%, and he says, let's sign this document about these principles and leave the other principles for later negotiations. And as Azerbaijan doesn't agree, and it says, no, there is no international practice of signing some points and leaving the others out of the document. And I think the process was about these points. And the second thing is that now there is a real pressure from the Western side. And today some Armenian parliamentaries even spoke about it. I don't know, they were aware that it is not it's not okay to speak about it or not, but one of them said, like, West now wants really an agreement to be signed now, and we have pressure from the West, and Azerbaijan also has some pressure from the West, and that's why they want an agreement to be signed till the end of the year, till the COP summit, etc. And that's why we see these processes, and we see that now especially Armenian side is really actively engaged in this process, and they want some progress till the end of the year.
So we know that Aliyev in the past has rejected signing until all of its demands are met. But is it possible that something will be signed before the COP summit, which is, I guess, less than 2 weeks away, if I'm not mistaken? And if something is signed, will that mean that Pashinyan will make more concessions? Or is it possible that Aliyev will be convinced by the West that, okay, sign something so that we can claim victory, whether it's for the elections or whatever? What is your opinion on the likelihood of something being signed before COP29?
I don't think really that anything will be signed, because Azerbaijan isn't really interested in signing a document. The process of negotiations is more important for Azerbaijan than the result, because they are gaining everything they want in the process. And when they sign something, this will stop. And now they are announcing some new things they want as precondition for signing the document, and Armenia is trying to meet these preconditions to sign the document. And besides that, Azerbaijan is showing to the West that it is engaged in the process, and it gains some dividends during this process also from the West and from the Russia. And it shows to West that it is engaged in the negotiations, and it tries to be constructive. At the same time, it shows to Russia that I'm not going to sign anything by mediation of the West. I'm still your partner in this process, etc. So I don't think anything will be signed. The main precondition of Azerbaijan is now the making changes in Armenian constitution. Armenian side tried to overcome this precondition by this announcement of the Constitutional Court of Armenia, saying that they used the document of delimitation and demarcation to announce that our constitution refers to the Declaration of Independence, but it doesn't mean that the Declaration of Independence has some impact on our policy, etc., etc. So they tried to show to Azerbaijan that we are solving this issue, and the declaration will not mean anything and will not make any obstacles in the process of our relations. But I don't think that Azerbaijan is going to accept this, because they understand that, and they not even understand, they announce that we want something that will be the result of the decision of Armenian nation, but not the government of Armenia, because that's why we want changing the constitution by referendum, where all the Armenian people will come and say that we are okay, we will not have any desires connected to Artsakh, etc., and that no one new government will be able to change this situation, saying that they don't agree with the policy and decisions of Pashinyan and his government.
Okay, but let me just then counter that with the fact that I don't think it's possible for Pashinyan to change the constitution so quickly. And if Azerbaijan really wants to happen, then it will have to rely on Pashinyan to be re-elected. And there are some analysts who believe that an interim document that is signed that will give Pashinyan basically the tool that he needs to go to voters and say, see, I brought peace and therefore you need to vote for me. So how important is it for Aliyev to give this tool to Pashinyan to get re-elected, whether it is in a snap election maybe sometime in 2025 or the scheduled parliamentary election in 2026? So sometime prior to that, giving Pashinyan this tool, this agreement, so that Pashinyan will be re-elected and continue implementing Azerbaijan's conditions, because it seems like Azerbaijan has a very strong influence, or Aliyev has a very strong influence on Pashinyan right now, and Pashinyan is very compliant.
There was a moment in the negotiations when Azerbaijan started speaking about signing principles and then signing peace agreement. But they didn't continue this discourse, like something changed and they decided not to do that. And as I mentioned, Azerbaijan isn't really interested in signing quickly. And if we speak about giving Pashinyan some chance to be re-elected, etc., unfortunately, now it's not seen that Pashinyan will not be re-elected in today's situation. We don't see that we have any real alternative that has more higher ratings that he has, unfortunately. And besides that, we see that even this document on delimitation and demarcation is used by Pashinyan to say that I am bringing peace and I have results. and we have delimitation of our borders, and this will bring stability to for our country. Because speaking about a serious document, it means that some more important issues must be solved to let Armenian people think that Pashinyan really has a chance to change situation and to bring real peace to region. For example, the occupation of Armenian territory this issue of occupation must be solved. But we don't see that Azerbaijani government has any will to change the situation. And even Pashinyan announces that we are not going to fight for this. And we have hopes that the delimitation of the borders will give a chance to solve this issue. But in reality, he understands that these issues will not be solved, and he wants now to have why he wants to sign a document. For the first main issue is that he wants to show to his Western colleagues that he's constructive and he's he's so ready to sign anything that even he's ready to sign the document the way it is now. And the second thing, he understands that a new war is possible in any moment, and he hopes that signing a document will change the situation and will stop a new aggression or prevent a new aggression of Azerbaijan. But at the same time, he understands that no document will really stop Azerbaijan if Azerbaijan wants a new war. And he tries to get some guarantees in this situation, understanding well that it's not really possible, because Azerbaijan has already understood that he can get anything he wants, and if he doesn't get it, he will say, okay, if you don't give it to me, I will take it, and this will work. And the Armenian side will say, okay, I'll give you that.
Anna, we've talked a lot about this demarcation delimitation principles agreement. So what is in this agreement? Because after reading it, all I can see is that basically it says the two countries can agree to anything and move forward on the basis of that agreement, right? No maps were specified as far as I could tell. There was nothing concrete to hold on to as a principle. You know, this is a document of principles, but there were no real principles in there. And Aliyev has said he will use only the maps that are the more advantageous for them. So it seems like we do not have any principles. We don't have any maps that we're talking about. In fact, the Armenian government admitted that different maps will be used for different regions of the border, despite previously saying that this so-called Alma-Ata declaration specified a distinct border, blah, 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 none of which I believe in. So how do you view this document? How does it protect any kind of values or principles for Armenians?
This document has a lot of problems, and to have some main points is the first thing is that this document shows that what happened in Tavush wasn't a real delimitation or demarcation, because it was even before signing these documents, and it wasn't in the context of this document like we do the first delimitation we do in Tavush, and later we'll do in a region that is important for Armenia, for example. It was something that Azerbaijan forced Armenian government to give these territories. They said it was a delimitation, but everybody understood that it was not a real delimitation. The second thing is, as you mentioned, there are no maps in this document, and not only there are no maps, but it's written there that Almaty is basis for delimitation now, but the basis for delimitation can change if in the peace agreement there will be a new basis announced.
Exactly.
The main thing Armenian side was saying that it is the most important thing Armenia gained from the process of Tavush and later from this delimitation demarcation agreement is that Azerbaijan agreed to announce that it recognizes the territory of Armenia according to the Almaty Declaration. But these documents show that in reality, Azerbaijan didn't agree to do this. And it says, okay, now Almaty is the basis for me, but I'll decide what to choose as basis for me later or in other regions where we will be delimiting our borders. The next thing is that there is no principle agreed saying what region will be the next and what is the order of the regions and the places where this delimitation and demarcation will take place and what are the deadlines for it. The problem of this is that in today's situation, we can wait that Azerbaijan will force Armenia to have delimitation in other regions where Azerbaijan wants to get some territories for Armenia. And at the same time, getting everything they want, they will delay the process as long as possible, not giving Armenia a chance to delimitate borders in other regions that are important for Armenia and will give Armenia a chance to get back its territories. They say that this agreement gives Armenia a chance to solve the issue of occupation of our territory. But in reality, we don't have these balances in this document, and Azerbaijan cannot agree to delimitate border in these regions in near future, and this issue will last for a very, very long time. And the next thing is that the logic of the process was to have some agreement of like peace agreement or something that will establish normal relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, then to delimitate the borders and to have to end this process of delimitation and demarcation, and then to have a big agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan where they will recognize each other's borders, territories, and this will be the basis for later relations that will be signed, ratified, and will be a real basis for the further relations. But now we have some other logic where we had some tavush at the first, then we have this agreement on delimitation, and the next thing, it was absurd that this agreement isn't really an agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It is just a document of the working document of the committee that will do the delimitation and demarcation of the borders. But we didn't ratify and sign the statement of November 9, but we ratify and sign the document, the working document of a committee. And it's the absurd of this situation, and that we don't have parallel processes in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Like in Armenia, the parliament shared this process, and the Constitutional Court shared this process with Pashinyan, and President shared this process, signing the document, the law at the end. And in Azerbaijani side, only Aliyev signed this document.
On the Armenian side, the agreement was just railroaded by Pashinyan through, the government's rubber stamp machinery, the Armenian Constitutional Court, the parliament, and of course, Armenia's president also rubber stamped the document. With all these ratifications making it extremely legal on the Armenian side, and on the other side, only Aliyev just signs it. There's nothing about their parliament and everything. Now, we know they're a dictatorship and everything Aliyev says goes, but could they just stop this whole thing at some point and say, well, we never ratified anything here. We have not agreed to this document, but you've agreed to it.
Yes, of course, we can have this as a result because, yes, we have different systems of government in our countries. We are parliamentary republic and they are presidential republic, but this doesn't change anything because in this situation in Armenia, we have all the branches of the power agreed to this agreement, to this document, like
Right.
the government, parliament, court, president, and at the Azerbaijani side, only the president. It means that later just Aliyev can sign a new document saying that, okay, this document is no longer basis for us, and we don't recognize it as something that will affect the processes later. And in Azerbaijani side, it's already a part of our laws and legislation. Yes.
But can we at some point stop and say that if it was signed only by one party in the agreement, then the agreement doesn't really exist? There was no agreement. If Azerbaijan does not ratify in the parliament, could we say that this agreement is null and void?
It's not so easy because you have the decision of the Constitutional Court, because you have all these branches sharing the responsibility for this document. And yes, Pashinyan says that there is no problem if Azerbaijan decides not to apply to this document in the future, we'll stop also. But it's not as easy because okay, we had this process of Armenian-Turkish declarations in 2010 when Armenian and the Turkish sides then agreed that we will have parallel processes of ratification of these documents, and Armenian side involved it in the big agenda of the National Assembly and waited till Turkish side will do the same. Mm-hmm. And then when in Turkey the process stopped, they also stopped. And then Sargsyan announced that he's taking away his signature from this document. But this document wasn't ratified, and as the process wasn't parallel in two countries, because it was important that both sides give the same meaning to this document. In this situation, we have the opposite case because we don't have the parallel situation in two countries, but it is so important for Pashinyan to show his constructive position to Aliyev and to his colleagues in other countries that he doesn't stop in this process, and he wants to go as fast as possible, no matter what it will take Armenia to, what problems will it take Armenia to in future.
A number of developments occurred this past week in the realm of the Armenian-Azerbaijani so-called peace process. You just mentioned Pashinyan in Kazan opting to keep Russia out of discussions with Azerbaijan, and last week it was the same thing at the 3+3 in Istanbul. Meanwhile, almost 2 weeks ago, the U.S. State Department appeared to downplay expectations of an imminent deal, but this last week, Joe Biden's special envoy, Michael Carpenter, visited Baku and then Yerevan to urge Aliyev and Pashinyan to finalize an agreement. Anna, what was Michael Carpenter's message to Aliyev and Pashinyan, and has it lit some kind of a fire under Aliyev to move forward with this agreement?
U.S. administration is really interested in moving the process on as quickly as possible because the elections are coming soon, and they understand well that if this depending on the results of the elections, and even before the results will impact the policy of US, but there will be a gap in the time when US will not be able to actively involve in the processes in other regions, also in South Caucasus. And this will give a chance to other countries like Russia in this situation to actively involve or to try to change the situation, to change the balances in the region, and to have bigger involvement in the processes. And that's why Biden administration decided to make final steps to move the process on. And we don't know what's the content of these negotiations, but of the envoy with the sides, but it's not difficult to understand that it was this pressure on the sides to sign something quickly that will also, if they sign something in the coming days before the elections, this will give an opportunity to democratic administration of US, show to, for example, Armenian diaspora that they are so actively involved in the processes that even in the last minutes, they helped Armenia to sign this document and bring peace to Armenia, for example. Yes. That's why Biden sent his envoy and wrote this letter to the sides, even trying to be as accurate in his statement as possible, not to touch the feelings of Azerbaijan, and to be as constructive as possible in this situation.
Just closing the loop, Asbet talked about the 3+3 platform. We talked about, today that Armenia rejects any efforts to move it from a bilateral to a multilateral format, especially if Russia is involved, I guess. But can Armenia find some use and some value in the 3+3 platform? And why is it resisting? Let's say it doesn't want Russian mediation, that's agreed, but why not legitimize and give Iran more voice in the process? Because it seems that Iran also has a strong interest in maintaining Armenia's integrity of the borders, at least in the south.
First of all, let's not forget that the 3+3 was the Turkish initiative. And Turkey was really interested in solving the problems of the region in the regional platforms, where they are the official representatives of the West in the region, and that gives them very strong positions in this process. And in this context, it's really interesting that during the Pashinyan-Erdogan meeting in New York, there was later announcement by Erdogan that Pashinyan asked Turkish side to play a positive role in the context of normalizing Armenian-Azerbaijani relations, and Armenian government didn't deny that they had such discussions with Turkish side. And this means that, as a fact, Armenian today's government doesn't want Russia as a mediator, but they are not against to the Turkish special role in these negotiations, understanding very well that Turkish side is not going to help Armenia in this process. It's going just to push more Armenia to meet Azerbaijan's preconditions.
So let me get this straight. No to Russia, no to Iran, but yes to Turkey, yes to Azerbaijan. Is that correct?
Yes, it's unfortunately it's correct. And besides that, today's process is, as a result, it's a process of. It is really a Western initiative, and we have real Western mediation of the process. They decided to discuss issues without mediators, like to have bilateral meetings, because not Russia, not West, we will solve our issues together. But at the same time, we see that US is playing a special role, and it was the initiative of US, and even now US envoy is trying to push the process on. And that's why Armenia isn't really interested in giving a more place to Iran in this process and to Russia in this process. Yes, Armenia had to agree to these meetings in 3+3 platform because they don't want to deny any initiative, but of Turkey, but at the same time, they are not interested in regional mediation of these processes because they are interested in Western mediation and they want to solve issues without other players.
Understood. Okay, I want to cover this because I think it has been not covered widely, but the agreement on the EU monitoring mission in Armenia was signed in February 2023, and the original duration was for 2 years. So that means sometime in 2025, it will expire and will need to be renewed. The Armenian government had previously justified this mission, who is armed only with binoculars, maybe some high-power binoculars, but only binoculars, as an additional layer of security for Armenia. In fact, they use the word guarantees. At the same time as there are discussions in Armenian political circles on renewing the monitoring agreement, Azerbaijan has increased its rhetoric against the EUMA. Azerbaijani media is replete with negative articles about the mission, claiming that the mission is collecting intelligence on Azerbaijan, on Russia, on Iran. And recently, Aliyev himself complained to a visiting, I believe, EU representative that the EU mission was only supposed to be 2 months, but it was prolonged without any consultations with Azerbaijan. And at the same time, while in parliament, the foreign minister of Armenia, Arad Mirzoyan, said that as long as there is no signed, again, air quotes, peace treaty, then Armenia continues to have concerns about Azerbaijani actions, and therefore a neutral third party is justified. To me, that seemed a little bit weird. Essentially, does Mirzoyan's statement imply that the EU monitors may leave after an agreement is signed? Essentially, this is another concession that Armenia is offering Azerbaijan if Azerbaijan signs something.
I don't really think that EUMA will leave if agreement is signed because today Armenia is trying to get some security guarantees from the EU, from the West. And as a result, this mission is the only guarantee, air quotes, for the security of Armenia. Because okay, Armenia is buying some weapons or some cars from France, but at the same time, if Armenia really will decide to make Russia leave the region or leave base in Armenia, it means that Armenia will not have any external help in the security issues. And that's why today is the most possible thing that Armenia got from the EU, because anytime when we speak with our colleagues from EU and they say, okay, Armenia has to make Russia leave, etc., etc., the main point we mention is that, okay, we have very bad working or even not working the system of external system of security with Russia, but at the same time we don't have any alternative for this. And EU announces that EU is not about security, and you cannot wait that EU will come and will have any forces in Armenia, will give Armenia any security guarantees, etc., etc. So this mission was the only thing that the EU was ready to give to Armenia, and I think that Armenian government will do everything to make this mission as long as possible, even if they have only binoculars, because they say that it helps. But here I will mention another thing, that Armenian government, if you remember, Pashinyan, after his meeting with Aliyev in Dushanbe, before the war of 2020, where they agreed not to have any incidents in the borders. And he started to make his PR on an idea that, okay, the previous government of Armenia couldn't agree with Azerbaijan about this. We had so many incidents, we had so many hostages as a result, and now I agreed and nobody dies on the borders. But as a result, we had the situation when Azerbaijan continuously improved its positions on the borders, and they made some reinforcements, and as a result, they started war with better positions than they had before these Dushanbe agreements. And Armenian side wasn't striking, wasn't doing anything to stop these processes, not to make any risks for the agreement, and not to have any risks for the reputation of Pashinyan, who agreed on this. But as a result, Azerbaijan gained from this process, and they increased their potential and had better positions for war. And now we can have the same situation because, okay, we have EU mission, but at the same time, we have Armenian territory occupied by Azerbaijan. And we see that Azerbaijan makes real constructions on the territory. They are enforcing their positions, and they are not going to leave these positions, and they are making it a new point for them for a new potential aggression against Armenia. So this mission today, if it helps Armenia not to have any new incidents on borders, but at the same time, we don't know what will be the result of this process. And the next thing is that if this mission is effective, then why Armenian government is saying we need a new mechanism, bilateral mechanism of investigation of the borders? It means that they are not sure that this mission is really effective.
Let's go on to, again, one more time to talk about COP29. Members of the Armenian government are now discussing the level of participation, not if, but in what level the Armenian government will participate in Azerbaijan's COP29 climate change conference. Again, air quotes everywhere. So it's clear that they intend to attend, but should Armenia decide to go, what's in it for Armenia to go to Baku and apparently legitimize Aliyev's horrible human rights violations, Azerbaijan's horrible environmental record, the practice of holding on to hostages and prisoners of war? What can Armenia get from attending this conference?
I'm not sure what Armenia can get from attending this conference, but I can say that Azerbaijan will gain a lot from the presence of Armenian side in this conference, because it will show to the world that even with prisoners in Baku, I have no problem with Armenian side, and they are ready to come to Baku and to continue this dialogue with me in my capital. And that means that everything I'm doing is okay for Armenian side. And then if it's okay for Armenia, why are others talking about this? People in I don't know, the French side speaking about the hostages of war and prisoners in Baku, like European Parliament having resolution speaking about the rights of Artsakh people. And if in this situation, if nothing changes, if Azerbaijan's rhetoric doesn't change, they speak about using force in any situation when Armenia doesn't agree to do what they want. If Armenian side goes to Baku and says, okay, we are participating in your conference, even if they go there and speak about prisoners or other issues, it doesn't change anything. Their presence in Baku will be used by Aliyev to show to the world that we have a very good dialogue with Armenian side, and everyone that makes some announcements or approve some resolutions, they have some negative role in this dialogue, and this must not be done. So I'm sure that Armenian side in this situation it doesn't make any positive change for Armenian side to go there. But I'm sure that Aliyev did his best to make Pashinyan go, or Pashinyan or anyone from his government to go to Baku. And it's another thing that Armenian side does for Aliyev and for Azerbaijani government, hoping they will gain anything from it, but I'm sure they will not.
Anna, on October 24, the European Parliament passed a resolution addressing the human rights situation in Azerbaijan as well as its relations with Armenia. The resolution demands Azerbaijan to withdraw from Armenian territory and prescribes readiness to apply sanctions if Azerbaijan doesn't. The resolution also proposes support for Armenia through the European Peace Facility and also extending the mission of the EU observers in Armenia. So what can be expected from such resolutions, considering that this is the parliament saying one thing and then the executive body of the EU conducts policies that are completely orthogonal to the spirit of such resolutions?
I think this resolution and any other resolutions of this kind are really important because they show us that in Europe, they really understand what's going on, and if even the governors of the EU today are making their decisions based on their interests but not on values. In European Parliament, they are really speaking about values, and they are saying that according to our values, this is the truth and this must be done. Of course, we understand that the resolution of European Parliament doesn't have a binding rule for the governors. But at the same time, there are situations and there are some documents that go to European Parliament for ratification. For example, the same SEPA agreement was ratified in all the EU member countries and in European Parliament. And maybe in such crucial situations, the voice of the European Parliament may play an important role. And besides that, in today's situation, any voice speaking about the rights of the people of Artsakh is very important because, unfortunately, the government of Armenia is not doing this. And if you don't have a state speaking about the interests of these people, in this situation, it's important. Any voice speaking about this is very important, especially if this voice comes from the legislative body of the European Union.
We know as well that, for instance, the Canadian Foreign Ministry made such announcements. The presidential candidates in the US are talking about it. But even if Armenia's official policy seems to be to completely ignore the issue of rights and security for ethnically cleansed population of Artsakh, can interest groups who have a stake in the issue use such announcements and resolutions, and how exactly? We know, for instance, that the commission that was created by the Parliament of Artsakh in exile, headed by former Foreign Minister Vartan Oskanyan, is talking to a lot of policymakers and foreign dignitaries. How can non-state interest groups who have a stake in this use such announcements specifically?
For sure, they can use it, and I'm sure they will do it because it's such some dossier of the of international community speaking about the rights of these people that that is important to use now and to collect as more people around these ideas as it is possible in different countries, in legislative bodies, in different parties from different states, because the situation can change in any moment, and at that time we will have this basis for changing the situation and for speaking about the rights of these people from different platforms. And this commission of the Vartan-Oskanyan in this context plays really important role because they work in different countries and they do huge work speaking about the rights of Artsakh people with different policymakers, with interest groups, with people who have their impact on policymakers. And that's why I am sure this resolution will be a strong tool in their toolkit for their further work. And I hope that this resolution will be some basis for other resolutions from other bodies coming in the future. And in the end, it will make Azerbaijan to understand that this issue is not closed, and that the world understands that the conflict will not be solved until the rights of these people are not preserved.
Okay, that's a good place to wrap up for the week. So now I'd like to ask each of you if there's something on your mind that you would like to share with our listeners. Anna?
Let's start with Hovik.
Okay, let's start with Hovik then.
Aspet, I hope you don't mind my rant being one of those lengthy ones today, but hey, I have a lot to say and I will say it. First and foremost, please use the hashtag COP29 to follow the commentary on social media about Baku's upcoming greenwashing summit, otherwise known as COP29, and let your voice be known on Armenian hostages held in Baku and the aggressive policies of Azerbaijan and Turkey towards Armenia and Armenians worldwide. Do your part to bring them back, participate in social commentary, and let your voice be heard. Now, I'd like to start a discussion about being a political Armenian. Okay, what does this mean? It means someone who cares about the Armenian nation and the survival of Armenians worldwide. As a disclaimer, I will preface all of this by saying that this is my own opinion, and please don't interpret it as the opinion of Groong or any of the people in this podcast besides me. Being a political Armenian means not just adhering to the culture, the church, or speaking the language, or any other element of Armenianness, but also conducting your day-to-day actions towards the betterment of Armenia and Armenians worldwide in a concerted, strategic manner. And in order to be a true political Armenian, Armenians must agree on the correct political theory that explains what is happening to us today. But first and foremost, as part of that theory, we have to have consensus on what are the main challenges and threats to our nation. So today, during my rant, I'm going to focus just on the threats part of it, because everything else derives from that. All the solutions that we can envision should take into account these threats that I will say in just a moment. Some may find these as unsurprising, others may be provoked to rage in our comments, but I think it's important to have this discussion. Okay, so the main threats to Armenia and Armenians today. The first and proximal threat to Armenia and Armenians is pan-Turkism. This is the ideology of the Turkish and Azerbaijani states, and it envisions the unification of all Turkic people in a single state and swallowing up anything in between. This is a critical threat to Armenia. Besides being the guiding ideology that enabled the Armenian genocide, this is the ideology by which Erdogan enticed and enabled Azerbaijan to win the 2020 war, the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, and the continued physical threat of elimination of the state of Armenia as we know today. If pan-Turkism prevails, then Armenia, if it exists at all, will be a rump state fully under Turkish and Azerbaijani influence. The second threat to Armenia and Armenians is extreme Zionism. I say this with all due respect to our Jewish and Israeli friends, but my definition of this term, and please hear me out, extreme Zionism is an ideology which envisions complete dominance of the Middle East, the greater Middle East, by the state of Israel, which sees Iran as one of its main enemies. Guided by this ideology, extreme Zionists are now conducting a genocide in Gaza, attacking Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, and posing threats to many other states in the region, and their ultimate goal is the dismemberment of Iran. If extreme Zionism succeeds, then Iran will be eliminated, and as a consequence, Azerbaijan and Turkey will be strengthened much more. Therefore, even if indirectly, I see this ideology as a critical threat to Armenia. The third threat to Armenia and Armenians is unipolar world order. This is a world order that we live under today, that I hope is changing, but it has existed since 1990s, and under this ideology, among other effects, the United States is bound to support its allies and partners through many organizations, including NATO. And as the main enforcer of US hegemony in the region, Turkey has been given a carte blanche to attack Iraq, occupy Syria, and to enable the 2020 war, which resulted in the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and the threats to Armenia we see today. Therefore, I see US hegemony as a critical threat to Armenia and Armenians. So to summarize, I argue that there are three critical threats above anything else to Armenia and consequently to Armenians worldwide. Those three threats are pan-Turkism, extreme Zionism, and unipolar world order. You might argue that the current state of Armenia is powerless against these threats, but that doesn't mean that we should not be aware of them or we should ignore them. Only through consensus can we come up with solutions and a plan to survive as a state and as a nation. And if you disagree with me, which you might, then please go ahead and let me know how wrong I am. Go to the comments section under this video or anywhere else you're listening to this and let me know what you think. Don't hold it back. I appreciate it. And I would just like to repeat that this was my own opinion and it may not reflect the policies of Groong, the opinion of Aspet or anyone else on this podcast. So thank you and let me know what you think.
Anna, that gave you 5 minutes to think about something.
No, I was listening to what Hovik was saying, and it was really interesting. I'll speak about the main ideas. I was thinking after the referendum of Moldova, when it showed that the situation in the world and in today's in our region isn't as simple as it seems sometimes. And this referendum showed the world that the situation can change any moment. And even if it's thought that the Western civilization, the Western policy, etc., is something that Eastern Partnership countries should always dream about, like even Moldova, the society of Moldova in this situation thought more about their security than their European perspectives. And later this discourse continued in Georgia, when we again saw that even during years the Georgian society was and is very pro-European, and they see themselves to be a part of EU. Today, also this discourse of is it better in today's situation to think about security or to think about the integration with the West more and to become a part of this play that West and Russia are playing. The big part of the society decided that their security is more important. And in this context, I'm sometimes scared when I understand that in our society, we see more this populism winning. And today's government is saying always that when we speak about only our security, it stops our progress and it doesn't let us to be a part of the Western world. So I think that the process is going on in the region must make us think about do we really want to become the part of this West and Russia war? And it will Armenia gain from becoming a part of this process? Because other countries are already thinking about it and making some decisions. Unfortunately, I don't see this discourse in Armenia. I see just some political, very populistic statements and announcements, but I don't see real discourse in the society.
Thank you both for your thoughts, and thank you, Anna, for joining us today. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was our week in review, recorded on October 29, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Ana Karapetyan, who is the director of the Insight Analytical Center for Applied Policy and Research. She has a PhD in political sciences and is a lecturer at the Russian Armenian University. For more on all the participants in the show, please go to our show notes, which are at podcasts.groong.org/episode number. And finally, folks, just to repeat what Hovik said a little bit earlier in the show, if you listen to our show on Apple Podcasts, for example, on your iPhone or iPad or your Mac computers, please consider rating our show and leaving a brief review. Thank you in advance.